All right, so today we are going to be diving into a case that is really unsettling, to say the least.
Yeah, definitely unsettling.
It's the story of Nathan Medina, who
Hmm.
is currently in prison for murder, but he's always maintained that he's innocent.
Right, and you've given us a lot to work with here. Police interview transcripts, court documents, even sections of Nathan's own account of what happened.
It's a lot to unpack.
It is.
And our goal here is to really try to make sense of it all,
Hmm.
highlight places where the stories don't line up,
Mm-hmm.
and hopefully help you understand how we even got to this point.
Exactly, because there are so many twists and turns.
Right, like you start going down one path and then suddenly something new pops up and you're like, wait, how does that even fit in?
Exactly.
So to really grasp how this all unfolded, I think we need to rewind back to the very beginning,
Tis a beginning.
March 20th, 2008. It all starts with this frantic 911 call from a woman named Beverly Rhodes.
Okay.
So try to picture this. She's home alone with her son when she hears someone breaking in.
Oh, wow.
Chaos erupts, and she manages to call 911. But here's the thing. Even before she gives any description or anything, she says, quote, Nathan Medina just shot my son.
Wow. So right off the bat, she's certain it's him.
Yeah, and that really struck me when I first heard that call.
Yeah.
Because she even admits that she couldn't really see what was happening.
And that's really interesting because it brings up this whole area of eyewitness testimony, right? Like how much of what we think we see is actually influenced by other factors, like our emotions in the moment.
Absolutely. And I mean, think about it. You're talking about a situation where someone breaks into your home, there's pepper spray involved.
Yeah.
It's incredibly stressful.
Exactly. You're flooded with adrenaline, fear, your senses are heightened. It's not exactly the most reliable situation for making accurate observations.
Right. And it's not just everyday stress we're talking about here.
No, not at all.
Rhodes was attacked with pepper spray, like you said.
Yeah.
So you can only imagine how intense that must have been.
Yeah, absolutely terrifying.
And on top of all that, there's this whole other layer to the story.
Okay.
So remember those court documents you gave us that allege all this misconduct?
Right.
Well, it turns out that Rhodes and Nathan's father were already in this bitter legal battle over a construction project gone wrong.
That definitely adds another dimension to things.
It does. And that lawsuit, it keeps popping up throughout the entire investigation and the trial.
It makes you wonder, what role did that prior relationship play in all of this?
Exactly. Did it somehow influence how the police approached the case right from the start? Did it create any unconscious biases?
Right, because if you already suspect someone because of a past conflict, that could definitely color how you interpret the situation.
And it raises questions about motives.
Absolutely. Were there underlying reasons for things to escalate the way they did?
So we've got this frantic 911 call, a pre-existing conflict, and a whole lot of unanswered questions.
A lot of layers.
Yeah, to really understand what happened that night, I think we need to take a closer look at what exactly Rhodes told the police about the attack itself.
Okay, so we're going deeper into the details of her account.
Exactly, because here's where it gets even more complicated. Her story actually changes over time.
Really?
Yeah, and this is where those interview transcripts you gave us are crucial.
Oh, I see. They give us that sort of like raw, unfiltered look at what was said right after it happened.
Right before any narratives were solidified.
Oh, okay. That makes sense.
So in these early interviews, right after the attack, Rhodes, she repeatedly says that she couldn't really get a good look at the attacker.
She couldn't see him clearly.
Right. There's even a point where the detective asks her directly, did you also see his face or his body? And she responds, I couldn't see his. I just saw the hand arm.
Wow, so she's specifically saying she didn't see much.
Exactly. And this is where it gets really interesting during the trial. Rhodes changes her story.
Oh, wow. How so?
Yeah, so during the trial, she actually testifies that she did see Nathan's face and that she saw it clearly.
Oh, wow. So she goes from saying, I couldn't see his face to, I know it was him.
Exactly. And that shift from uncertainty to absolute conviction, that's a huge red flag when you're talking about eyewitness testimony.
Right, because it makes you wonder what changed in between those two statements.
Exactly. Like, was she influenced by something or someone? Did her memory just change over time? We know that's possible.
It happens all the time, right? Our memories are not as reliable as we think they are.
Not even close.
Especially with something as traumatic as this. I mean, imagine going through that kind of experience. Your brain is flooded with hormones. It's chaos.
Right. And on top of that, you've got detectives asking you questions, maybe even suggesting things without realizing it.
Exactly. It's easy to see how someone's memory could be swayed, even if it's unintentional.
And it's not just Rhodes' account that has these inconsistencies.
Oh, really?
We also have the testimony of another witness, Sean Mendel. He was a friend of Rhodes' son, and he lived in, like, a guest house on the property.
Okay.
And you actually gave us this really interesting clip from his police interview. It was taken, like, right after the attack. And he's visibly shaken. You can hear it in his voice.
I bet.
He describes the scene, a man with a gun. It's just crazy.
So we're hearing his raw, immediate reaction to what happened.
Yeah.
So before any outside information could have gotten in and potentially colored his memory.
Exactly. And that's what makes this clip so important. So let's listen to what he says.
Okay.
He says this. So I don't think that's him, no. You guys are going to have to ask Sam or Josh if that's him, because I know they'd be able to recognize him a lot better than I would.
So he's specifically saying that he's not sure it's Nathan.
Right? He even tells the police straight up. You guys should double-check with Rhodes and her son, because they would know better than me.
Wow. That's a pretty big detail.
It is. And what makes it even more significant is that at this point, he hasn't been exposed to Rhodes' identification yet.
So he's relying solely on what he remembers seeing.
Exactly.
Interesting.
It is. But here's where it gets even more troubling.
Okay.
So according to court documents, while Mendel is at the police station, Detective McColgan, he's the lead detective on the case, he approaches Mendel.
Okay.
And they have this conversation, and it's actually caught on tape.
They recorded it.
Yeah, and in this recording, McColgan tells Mendel that Rhodes has already positively identified Nathan.
See, that's what worries me in these situations. It's like, you never want to accidentally lead a witness.
Yeah, right, because even if it wasn't intentional, that kind of information can plant a seed, you know?
Absolutely. And then it's like, how can you be sure if your memory is really your own or if it's been influenced by something someone else said?
It's like that whole thing about if you keep repeating a lie, eventually it starts to feel true, even if it isn't.
Right, exactly. It's that power of suggestion.
And it makes you wonder if something similar happened here. You know, hearing that Rhodes had already identified Nathan, did that somehow impact Mendel's own memory of the event?
Especially when you're already dealing with the trauma of what happened that night. Like, your mind is more susceptible to suggestion.
And it's not just the witness testimonies that have these inconsistencies. Remember how Rhodes initially said that he might have been wearing gloves?
Yeah, I remember that.
Well, in her trial testimony, she's completely certain that the intruder was not wearing gloves.
Interesting.
So again, it's like these might seem like small details, but they start to add up.
They do, because if you're trying to build a case based on what people say they saw, you need those accounts to be rock solid.
Exactly. And when you have these inconsistencies, these little cracks, it makes you question the whole foundation of the case.
Right, like if one thing doesn't add up, it makes you wonder what else might be off.
Exactly. And when it comes to influencing a jury, nothing is more concerning than the allegations of suppressed evidence in this case.
Suppressed evidence? What do you mean?
So this is where it gets really unbelievable. There are crucial recordings that have gone missing.
Recordings of what?
So we're talking about the 911 call from Sean Mendel and 2 video interviews with other witnesses, all of which could have provided really important context to this whole story. And they vanished.
Wow, they just disappeared.
Gone. And to make matters worse, the defense never had access to any of these recordings.
Oh, they couldn't even review them.
Nope. Nathan's lawyer, he was actually blindsided by this, and get this, he had actually trained the prosecutor in this very case.
Wait, so the prosecutor, he was trained by the same person who was now defending the accused?
It's a small world, I guess.
That's a crazy coincidence.
Right. And on top of that, Nathan's eyewitness expert, who was ready to assess how reliable the identifications were, she couldn't do her job properly because those recordings were gone.
That's a huge blow to the defense.
It is. It's like trying to put together a puzzle, but half the pieces are missing.
Exactly. You're left wondering what those missing pieces would have revealed.
Right. And it makes you question whether those recordings contained information that might have contradicted the prosecution's case. You know,
right. Like, what if there was something on those tapes that cast doubt on the whole thing? But we'll never know because they're gone.
Exactly. It's like this huge question mark hanging over the entire case. It's hard to even fathom the toll this has taken on Nathan and his family. I mean, can you imagine being convicted on what seems like shaky evidence at best?
Yeah, it's easy to get caught up in the legal back and forth, but we're talking about a human life here, someone who's always maintained his innocence and has spent years behind bars fighting for his freedom.
And it's not just him, right? It's his whole family who's been dragged through this ordeal.
Exactly. The emotional strain, the uncertainty, the constant appeals and legal battles, it's a lot to bear.
And as if that wasn't enough, There's another layer to this whole thing. Remember that lawsuit we talked about between Nathan's father and Beverly Rhodes?
The construction dispute, right?
Yeah, so after the shooting, she actually files a wrongful death lawsuit against Nathan and his entire family.
Wow. So not only is he facing a murder conviction, but now he's dealing with this massive lawsuit on top of it all.
It's like one thing after another, and it really highlights how these cases, they extend far beyond the courtroom. They have these ripple effects that impact everyone involved.
Absolutely. It's a stark reminder that we're not just dealing with abstract legal concepts here. We're talking about real people with real lives that are being deeply affected by these events.
So we've gone through all of this material you provided, the police interviews, the court documents, witness statements, and it seems like with every piece of information we uncover, more questions pop up.
Right. It's like trying to navigate a maze with dead ends and false turns at every corner.
Exactly. We've got conflicting testimonies, missing evidence, allegations of misconduct by both the police and the prosecution.
Wow.
It's just a lot to process.
And it raises some serious concerns about the criminal justice system as a whole, right? Like, it's supposed to be this beacon of fairness and impartiality, but cases like this expose the potential for errors, for biases to creep in, and for those errors to have life-altering
It's
consequences.
a sobering thought, and it makes you wonder how many other cases like Nathan's are out there.
Yeah.
How many other people are trapped in a system that may have failed them.
It's a question we should all be asking ourselves. And it speaks to the importance of accountability, of transparency, and of constantly striving to improve the systems that are designed to protect us.
Well said. And on that note, that wraps up our deep dive into the deeply unsettling case of Nathan Medina. We've covered a lot of ground today, but as we've seen, this case is far from over. What are your takeaways from all of this? Let us know your thoughts, and remember, justice requires our active engagement. It's a responsibility we all share.